So, hopefully you're able to look at these questions, remember what you did in class, and figure out that we're going to talk about multiplying fractions. The key word in all of these that helps us remember that we are multiplying is the word of. Because when you have 3 groups of 2, you have 6, and groups of tells you to multiply. Well, now we're just taking our groups and we're cutting them into parts. And so this is what is half of a group of a half. And we perhaps used manipulatives in class, or we drew pictures to help us figure out that half of a half was a fourth. And a fourth of a half was an eighth. And 3/4 of a half, well, that was 3/8. Now, we may not have solved these in class because the numbers are larger, but we did something that we're going to talk about on the next screen to help us figure out that 5/6 of 12/50 is 60/300. And then we had to simplify that, and so maybe we would be able to look at that immediately and see that we could use 10, and so we would get 6/30. And then we could use 2, and we would get 3/15. And oh look, we could use 3 and get 1/5. A lot of work, a lot of simplifying, but multiplication and division go together. So then we might look at this one and, well, 6/7 of 42/12. Does that mean I need a scrap piece of paper to figure out what 6 times 42 is? And maybe I know 7 times 12 is 84, but maybe I don't. Well, what is 6/7 of 42/12 is more easily solved if you remember the machine we used in class today. And the machine we used in class today took these problems and slid them through, and when they came out, they were new. We'll come back to this and answer the question 6/7 of 42/12. Here's a picture of our machine, and if you'll remember in class, these went through our magic simplifying machine and came out to look like this. And some students were able to understand how that happened, and some students had a little bit of a harder time. But if you'll notice, when it went through, 3/10 simplified to 1/2 times 1/2. And 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. And so what was happening in the machine was the machine was finding fractions that could be simplified. If what I'm going to do is multiply 6/7 times 42/12, and obviously we've figured out that multiplying across the top and across the bottom is the very easiest way to do this, well, I'd have to multiply across the top and multiply across the bottom. But because of the commutative property of multiplication, the commutative property of multiplication says if you have to multiply 6 times 42 and put it on the top, and 7 times 12 and put it on the bottom, well, it says you're allowed to switch the order. So what if I switched the place of 42 and 6? What if I moved this one here? So then I have 42/7 times 6/12. And look at that. I have fractions I can simplify. 6/12 is the same as 1/2. And 42/7 is the same as 6. And what is half of 6? What is 6 times 1/2? Well, 6 times 1/2 is 3. So I'm able to flip the order of the numerators or the denominators when I'm multiplying because I'm multiplying straight across. Here are some fractions that we can simplify before we multiply. And we have to remember that simplify means to divide by a form of 1. And if you'll remember, these are our forms of 1. Anytime your numerator and denominator are the same amount, you have a form of 1. Because remember, the denominator is the name of the fraction that gathers its name because of how many it takes to make a whole. So if I have thirds, it takes 3 to make a whole, and well, if I have 3, then I have a whole, and we call a whole 1. So what we're doing here is we're looking to see if we can change these fractions so that they can be something we can simplify. Well, I right here can see 9/12. That's a fraction I can simplify. And look, if I switch these, 2/6 is now a fraction I can simplify. So I can simply, because I switched the order, rewrite this problem and it becomes something easier to multiply. So instead of 9/12, well, I can divide that by a form of 3/3 and get 3/4. And 2/6, well, that simplifies to 1/3. And this is 5/3. And now I have to multiply across the top and across the bottom. But look, I see another fraction that I can simplify. I see 3/3. So what if I rewrite that one more time? 3/3, if I just switch these, times 1/4 times 5/3. Well, now my answer, this is 1, so I can write 1 times 1/4 times 5/3, 5/12 is my answer to this problem. What if I noticed at the beginning of this problem that I could switch, instead of simplifying 9/12, I could simplify 9/3. Well, 9/3 can simplify to 3, and that's the beauty of simplifying fractions. Is as long as there's a fraction that can be simplified, it doesn't matter which one you see. So it's kind of like a scavenger hunt, trying to find the numbers that go together. Let's try this one. Remember, you're simplifying a fraction by using a form of 1, which means you have to find the number on the top that can be divided by the same number on the bottom. So even though 10 and 16 can both be divided by 2, that's not simplifying a fraction. I would have to be able to do something on the top and on the bottom. And if I notice this, 8/16 is a fraction that can be simplified. So if I move 8/16 and I move this to 15/10, now I can rewrite this fraction in simplest form. 8/16 is 1/2. And 15/10, well, I can simplify this by dividing both the 15 and the 10 by 5. And so I would get 3/2. And now I can multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom. 3 steps to multiplying fractions. Fractionize, which means this only works with fractions. So in a situation like this where it's a whole number, simply write it as a fraction. Then simplify, then multiply. Let's take a look. 3/10 and 5/7. Now, you can rewrite it, but mathematicians typically try to find a way to do something with the least amount of writing. And so I would know that 5/10 could be simplified, and I would divide the 5 by 5 and the 10 by 5. So this would become a 1 and this would become a 2. It's completely okay if you rewrite it and write it neatly beside it because you don't like to slash this out. But this is the most common way that you'll see simplifying fractions. And then 3/7 can't be simplified. 3 times 1 is 3, and 2 times 7 is 14. So 3/10 times 5/7 is 3/14. 9/2 times 6/4. Looking for a fraction. Remember, I can't use 2 and 4 because they're both on the bottom, but I do see 2 and 6, which means I could divide both something on the top and something on the bottom by 2. This would be 1, and this would be 3. Yes, I have a 3 and a 9, but they're not numerator-denominator, which means I can't simplify them. When you think about simplifying, I want you to think about a bow tie. You can simplify fractions in this position, in this position, in this position, or in this position. Never across the top or across the bottom. So 27/4 is this fraction simplified, which, yes, this could be turned into a mixed number, but in this case, leaving it as an improper fraction is completely acceptable. All right, and then we have another one where I can simplify the 4 and the 12 by dividing them both by 4. Divide the top by 4 and this becomes a 1. Divide the bottom by 4 and this becomes a 3. So my answer, 1 times 5 and 7 times 3. 5/21. Fractionize. So I simply make this a fraction. And 10 is the same as 10 wholes. So this is indeed a numerator, which means that I could simplify it with the 50. I could divide them both by 10. This would be 1, and this would be 5. So 1 times 24, and 1 times 5. 24/5. Again, you could turn it into a mixed number, but leaving it as an improper fraction is completely acceptable. Now, it's time to show what you know. Fractionize, simplify, multiply, top times top, and bottom times bottom. All right. Fractionize is what I did first. I don't see anything I can simplify, so I'm simply multiplying. 9 times 1, 1 times 8, 9/8. If you wrote 1 and 1/8, completely acceptable. This one, definitely seeing things I can multiply. The 7 and 14 can both be divided by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 14 divided by 7 is 2. These both can be divided by 15. 1, 2. 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 2 is 2. So 15/7 times 14/30 is 1. 1/2 times 1/2. Top times top, bottom times bottom, 1/4. 3/5 times 4, fractionize, multiply. 12/5. Looking for something to simplify? This one has 2. You could have simplified 2/6 to 1/3, or you could have simplified both of these by dividing by 2. Either way, you will get the same answer. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 4 times 2 is 8. 9 times 3 is 27. Last one, 4 can simplify with 12, and you can do it with either 12. So this could become 1, and this is 3. 12 times 3 is 36. 5 times 1 is 5. 36 is an acceptable answer, as well as 7 and 1/5.